Dan Mullen transitions after he pretty much maximized, I believe, what he was able to do there at Mississippi State. He goes to Florida in what appears to be a great situation for both coach and program.
Yeah, it was it's funny that we talked about Butch Jones and the way it ended there at Tennessee. Jim McElwain was kind of the same way at Florida. It just didn't seem like they'd ever meshed down there. If you check out Gators Breakdown podcast, the best Gators coverage there, Dave Juarez will tell you that. So I think the fans in Gainesville are very refreshed. With Dan Mullen, he's a Florida guy. He's been there before, and they see what he did with quarterbacks at Mississippi State, Dak Prescott, Nick Fitzgerald, and they think he can get another top quality quarterback there at Florida. Florida's went several years now without a quarterback who again reached his potential and really was a game changer on the field. So I think that's the hope of Florida fans, that Dan Mullen can get another top quarterback, a top performing quarterback, not just a top potential quarterback, but a top performing quarterback there in Gainesville to go along with a defense that always seems to be really good. So Gator fans are excited about that. Again, they finished better recruiting, but not really where they want it to be. So very similar situation in Gainesville, I think, as there is in Knoxville with the new coaches, with a coaching change. Of course, Dan Mullen's a little bit more seasoned because he has the head coaching experience at Mississippi State. But I think those two situations are fairly similar with respect to the fan bases, their expectations, and things like that.
Let's make the natural segue to Mississippi State, where Dan Mullen leaves and Joe Moorhead comes in from Penn State as the offensive coordinator, where he, of course, was very successful producing points and yardage there with a pretty talented offense, and takes over a pretty talented team here. This would appear to be the sleeper in the SEC Western Division. Not that they have a huge, legitimate chance of winning the division, but in terms of making noise and pulling off some upsets and sustaining what was a 9-win football team last year, I think they've got a pretty good shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe Moorhead, of course, coming from Penn State, so he's been able to coach up a lot of talent there. Some questions on his recruiting ability when you have James Franklin at Penn State. He's obviously your number one recruiting and sales guy there. But when you look at what Joe Moorhead's been able to do with the players that have come in to Penn State, clearly he's been able to coach those offensive players. Nick Fitzgerald coming back from injury, it's going to be, he had a pretty gruesome injury there late in the season. That was a tough one to watch. You don't ever want to see anybody get hurt, but that Nick Fitzgerald injury was a really tough one to watch. So we'll see how that affects him. Can Joe Moorhead make Nick Fitzgerald an effective passer? We know how well he can run the ball from the quarterback position, but can Joe Moorhead make him an effective passer out of the pocket? And then can he coach up the talent around him to make the Mississippi State offense more than one-dimensional with Nick Fitzgerald? The other thing is, that Big Ten East is a great division, but it's very top-heavy. You have three of the top teams in the nation there: Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan, top 25 team. Then you got Michigan State, but you also have some teams that aren't very competitive. In the SEC West, your top 3 or 4 teams might not be as good parallel as the top 3 or 4 teams in the Big Ten East, but your 5, 6, and 7 teams are I think night and day better than the 5, 6, and 7 teams in the Big Ten East. So it's a little bit different dynamic. You still have those tough 3 or 4 top 2 or 3 teams that you got to get over to win a division championship. But you also have the 5 and 6, 7 teams that are gonna threaten to ruin your season every Saturday as well. So it'll be interesting to see how Joe Moorhead does in his first head coaching stint at a Power 5 school in the SEC.
Yeah, any of us who keep an eye on both of those divisions couldn't imagine Mississippi State showing up in the Big Ten Eastern Division and finishing in last place, whereas in the SEC Western Division, any given year, throw those bottom 4 teams around and they could land in any which way, talking in recent years, Texas A&M, now Ole Miss, of course, post Hugh Freeze, and Mississippi State, and also Arkansas, of course, now. Jimbo Fisher, of course, had he left Florida State a couple of years ago when he was a very hot commodity and well-respected, not that he's not now, but considered one of the very best in college football when Florida State was at its peak. I think that would have been more of a story, not that it wasn't a huge story, but it would have just rocked the SEC. But Man, it just we're at a place with what Nick Saban continues to do at Alabama that I don't think any coach entering any program in that division seems to be a serious candidate to knock him off until we actually see some evidence on the field. But Jimbo Fisher certainly has the resources and the talent base with the recruiting uh, uh, base right there in Texas to do something special, you would think.
Yeah, you would think, but it's still a little bit of a head scratcher for me. It's not like Florida. The state of Florida is devoid of talent. A lot of talent there, and of course, Tallahassee is only 4 or 5 hours from Atlanta, another recruiting hotbed. Sure, Texas is a recruiting hotbed too, but it's not like Florida State's a football tradition rich school as well. A lot of resources there as well. Certainly more national titles in the last 100 years than Texas A&M has. I know there were some personal reasons that Jimbo wanted to get out of Tallahassee, and that's fine. But just the way that ended, it was a very nasty ending to that relationship. And then he goes to Texas A&M, so you're competing against Nick Saban in the same division as Nick Saban. He traded a real life national championship trophy for one he got today from Texas A&M. That's a future national champions trophy. You would think people are kind of getting tired of the gimmicks of college football, but maybe not there. They're not. So that was an interesting story out of today. But you're absolutely right. There's a ton of money at A&M, great facilities, probably the best division of football. You can debate Big Ten East or SEC West either way, but I think 1-7, the SEC West is probably better, arguably better. But point is, it's a great football division, tons of resources. So we'll see what Jimbo Fisher's able to do. Maybe he was looking to validate himself. Maybe he's looking to validate the fact that he's a coach that didn't succeed just because he came into a program that was going to succeed, whether he was the coach or not. Maybe he's looking to validate the fact that he can come into a program that's kind of mired in that second tier of schools and get it to national prominence. Some guys like that challenge. You look at Jim Harbaugh. He's a guy that doesn't like to stay one place too long. Stanford and the 49ers and then into Michigan, kind of things, things in Michigan aren't completely copacetic, but maybe Jimbo Fisher just had that he was at that point in his career where he wanted to go and get one more challenge before he retires, and that's fine. Again, there were some personal reasons he wanted to get out of Tallahassee, and it's fine too. It was just that was just kind of a soap opera drama that played out in college football. Not that there wasn't plenty of soap operas going on this off season, but that was just kind of an interesting one that didn't quite fit the normal pattern of the college football drama.
Teams and programs and coaches can take a lot from the Nick Sabans of the world in so many ways, and this would be another one. If you really truly consider yourself to be an elite program or have the ability to reach that, then you don't mess around with things like fake trophies with blank areas to post the date. You don't do gimmicky things like that. You don't become Oregon or someone like that has to go to some extension to validate yourselves or gain attention. I just think that you just go to work and put your nose down and you get enough attention anyway. You're in Texas, you're Texas A&M. You're not Alabama, Ohio State, USC, but you're, like you say, on that second tier. So if you just go to work and get the job done, you're going to get all the attention you need and earn it. Why set yourself up? Why not play into the old saying that you undersell and you overdeliver? That seems to be the best way to go typically.
Well, yeah, I think it's all about recruiting. And I think what people like you and I don't realize is how much that stuff resonates with the young people today. And it's not just the football players, but it might be a generational thing. That's a way that they reach out to the 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids that they're recruiting. We live in a world where we communicate that, the different generations communicate differently. Those of us of a certain age, you and me included, when we grew up, there wasn't Twitter or social media. So we didn't communicate by pictures. We didn't communicate by memes. We didn't communicate in short 140 characters at a time. We wrote on paper and letters and that kind of stuff. So I think it's not so much the gimmicks. I think it's the form of communication. I think a lot of that resonates with the youth, not because not because of the gimmicky nature, but just because of the method of communication. Uh, Not so much from a psychological perspective, but from a communicative nature. That's just how the current generation of high school kids communicate, and that's developed over the past 10, 15 years with social media, where the communications are much more visual, they're much more tangible, they're much more meme centric, and so on and so forth. And I really think it's all about recruiting and really connecting from a communicative standpoint to the youth that they're trying to bring into those programs.
So the more I process this line of thinking, the more I get it. I do think it's valid in a generation in which there's not a whole lot of length of reading, or taking in words audibly either. That, yeah, the visual works. And if you can bring the recruit on campus and say, there's our national championship trophy that we are just waiting to have you contribute to, and stamp the year right on the front of it, sometime between 2018 and 2021, you're going to be part of this. They can relate to that. They can see it. They can reach out and touch it, and they can identify it from the games that they've seen played in the national championship, where the guys are holding up the crystal ball, or whatever it is now. It's the other deal now that the BCS is over, but the other trophy. So I get it. I don't like it. It's just like with uniforms. I love that Penn State and Alabama show up every week, and I know exactly what they're going to look like, because they just say, hey, even if it's boring, it's who we are. It's what we've always been. And we don't need to do that like all these other schools do.
Yeah, I don't want to go full nerd on you, but that communication presupposes a lot of the generalizations we make of the younger generations. When you show somebody the trophy, you are presupposing that they're going to make the team. You are presupposing that they're going to start on the team. You're presupposing they've done all the hard work to get there, the practices, the classes. You're showing them the end state, the trophy. So you've presupposed all the other stuff, the hard work and the making the team and the sacrificing and the beating out the other 20 guys that you're trying to bring on the team. And so, a lot of people make generalizations on the youth of today. And one of those is they expect things for free, and that's fine. But when that generation hears those generalizations, they kind of adopt that. So again, it's much more of a communication method. And when you have stuff like what they did at Texas A&M, that kind of feeds into the generalizations that we make about the communication methods of these kids at this age, where you're presupposing all the foundational work and you're going straight to the results. So I think that's what they're doing. Then again, I think it's all about recruiting, and they're presupposing all the hard work, and they're getting straight to the result. This is what you're going to get when you come here: the national championship trophy. Never mind the practices and the classroom education and all the hard work, and you're going to have to beat out these 7 guys, and you're going to have to put in maybe a red shirt year and all that stuff. They're focused on the result, and kind of looking past the other 99.9% of the stuff that you have to do to actually get there. So again, it's a form of communication, and I think it resonates with the young kids, and it's strictly about recruiting.
We're covering the SEC with Mike LaValle from Last Word on College Football. We encourage you to join him and the rest of the staff right there for college football coverage. And I don't know that Brett Bielema came in the exact same year as Butch Jones, but if anything, it was only off by a year, and their trajectory was similar. He took over a down program, so his first season at 0-8 in the SEC, 3-9, certainly didn't startle anyone. And you saw what he put in play with the power running game and the NFL caliber backs and the offensive line, and he started to turn it around that second season, and really had that temporary breakthrough in defeating LSU and Ole Miss when they were both ranked top 15 in the nation. Then, the win total rose every year, and there was a tangible, in addition to the wins, a tangible increase in productivity and winning. And then they hit the end of that 2016 season. They were in good shape to finish that off with another step in the right direction. Then they came crashing down to a really bad Missouri team after leading like 24-7. Then they blew a 24-0 lead in the bowl game. And then this season, a thin roster, was torn to shreds by injuries, and it was the imperfect storm coming together for Brett Bielema that was his downfall as well in this 2017 season. So now we've got Chad Morris on hand at Arkansas, and as difficult as that climb is for a Mississippi State, or to a lesser extent what we just discussed with Texas A&M and those expectations in that division for Arkansas and Chad Morris, it is daunting. He's got the offensive background, but it's going to take a lot of defensive recruiting and coaching to even get them back into play in that division.
Yeah, certainly, Mark. And, Arkansas has kind of been snake bitten with coaches over the past few years. It's kind of interesting. The real story of Brett Bielema is he left Wisconsin when he was having success at Wisconsin to go kind of rebuild or kind of fix the Arkansas program. And it looked like he was making headway. But again, we talked with Jimbo Fisher about coming into the SEC West. It just shows how hard it is for a program in the SEC West to get back to that position 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4, and sustain it. It's just such a fight every year in the SEC West. And if you slip one year and regress, you're looking at a 3 or 4 year recruiting job to get back up to the top. And it's not just about your program and getting back up to the top. If Arkansas and Ole Miss want to get back up to that 2, 3, 4 level, somebody up there, Texas A&M, LSU, Mississippi State, one of those teams, if you're Texas A&M or Ole Miss, one of those 3 teams has to regress down, or Auburn. Auburn has to regress down. So it's not just about building your program up. It's about getting past the other programs as well. So certainly Chad Morris has his work cut out for him. It's interesting. It's always interesting to see the background of the coaches coming in. Of course, Chad Morris has the Clemson pedigree. We talked about Jeremy Pruitt having the Alabama pedigree, and then Chad Morris is an offensive-minded guy. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of the cross-pollination of football philosophies coming in. With Chad Morris with his Clemson pedigree and the offensive minded going up against the traditional Nick Saban defensive philosophies, and a lot of the coaches in the SEC West. It's interesting to see how those different coaching perspectives will pan out over there in the SEC West. I think Chad Morris is going to be pretty good at Arkansas. He's going to have to get some talented athletes in there. Of course, Chad Morris, but both him and Brett Bielema were both offensive minds, but kind of opposite spectrums of the offensive mind. Brett Bielema was about the tough, punishing running game, play action passes. If you really valued the tight end, Chad Morris is a little bit more modern. Not that it's better, but a more modern style offense, a little bit faster pace, up tempo kind of offense. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out there in Fayetteville. But I think Chad Morris is going to do well. I think it's just going to depend on how much talent he can get in there to Fayetteville and keep there.
And I've got to think that Chad Morris was desirable from the standpoint that he has strong ties to Texas, not just involving his previous job, but going back to his high school coaching days. And with the Arkansas recruiting situation from a high school standpoint within the state, they have to go elsewhere, and Texas is the likely candidate to be drawing Chad Morris's attention, along with Louisiana and Oklahoma, Missouri to a lesser extent, but really primarily Texas. They've got to go there to get most of their talent, and he wasn't able to really secure the kind of class that you would think from a number standpoint, from a ranking standpoint in the 55 range, that is going to do what you just outlined that he's going to need to do in the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Texas is known for recruiting and having a bunch of talent, but they're especially known for the quarterback position. Of course, Chad Morris is going to go try to find that top-ranked quarterback in Texas and show him what he's done with quarterbacks in the past. So he's definitely going to be looking for his quarterback in Texas.
Mike Laval from Last Word on College Football, helping us break down Tennessee and the SEC. Mike, we appreciate the time.
Mark, always a pleasure to join you. Thank you.